Trump likes to deal with big nations. He likes to deal with entities that have clout. So he's happy to deal with an EU. He will maybe deal with Germany. He will deal with China. He will deal with India. It's clout matters.
The biggest thing that Trump wants is that he wants the impression that he is the peacemaker and he's mediating this dispute. I think that's more important to him than the actual outcome.
Do you think it's sustainable, what he's achieved in Argentina?
Look, Milei has clearly been successful, but there has also been costs. I mean, there's been costs. There's more unemployed people. There's been costs to certain segments of society. So whilst I think in the UK we would do well to slim down our government or our bureaucracy a bit, our civil service a bit, we also need to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks, because I think if we did too much of that, we would have them on the streets.
From CapX, this is The Capitalist. I'm Marc Sidwell, and my guests today are Dominic Pino, economics editor and Rhodes Fellow at the National Review Institute in the US state of Virginia, and the economist and business consultant, Cornelia Meyer. Despite all the noise coming out of Washington, real progress in Ukraine remains elusive. Yet even a partial ceasefire could carry economic dividends. Vladimir Putin's latest proposal, fraught with political risk for Kyiv, has reignited debate across European capitals. Donald Trump has suggested Ukraine might cede the remainder of the Donbass in exchange for a halt to wider hostilities. For business leaders and policymakers alike, ending the war is both a moral and an economic imperative. Goldman Sachs estimates that a limited truce could lift Eurozone GDP by 0.2%, while a lasting settlement might deliver a 0.5% boost. But after what appeared to be humiliating scenes for Donald Trump in Alaska, are we getting further away from a solution? Dominic, there's been all sorts of exciting scenes and meetings going on in D.C. recently as the Trump administration continues to find some sort of deal. Is Donald Trump getting any closer to his quest for a peace prize?
Well, if Pakistan has anything to say about it, he is. Pakistan nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, mostly as a way to stick the finger in the eye of India. But no, I'm not exactly sure what the outcome of any of these talks will be. There's really been very vague indications about anything that has happened in them, and I think that's probably part of the reason. I think the biggest thing that Trump wants is that he wants the impression that he is the peacemaker and he is mediating this dispute. I think that's more important to him than the actual outcome. What we look at for actual outcomes and what they want, it's changed over time. If you look at people like J.D. Vance, the vice president, for example, he said, during his campaign for Senate that, like, why do we care at all what happens in Ukraine? And then you look at other people, though, such as the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. If you look at and things that Trump himself has said, they have made clear that this is a United States interest. Exactly what the outcome they want is still not clear, and it's really hard to have any of these conversations without Ukraine at the table, which, in Trump's meeting with Putin wasn't there, but then Trump met with Zelensky right after that separately. So until they can really get all three of them in a room together, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to say exactly what the outcome will be.
Cornelia, Dominic was saying there that maybe Trump doesn't worry that much about an outcome. He likes sort of presiding over these peace talks, seeming to be in charge of it all. But of course, Trump sees himself very much as a deal maker as well, and I suppose he would like to be seen as the person making the ultimate deal over Ukraine. But do you think that Putin is himself interested in peace?
Well, first of all, about Donald Trump, whatever you say about the man, at least he started to move the goalpost. For 3.5 years, nothing moved. And now at least people are starting to engage. And he got Zelensky in there. He got all the big European leaders in there. And that is a certain win of sorts. And he had a chat with, we had a conversation with Vladimir Putin. And that is a first step, but one swallowed does not make a summer. So we need to move this forward. I thought I found interesting, I watched very attentively yesterday, the news conferences. There is still, Trump basically says, look, we don't need a ceasefire. Let's negotiate about the peace. You had Chancellor Merz saying we need the ceasefire. But you also at the same time had on CNN the former Deputy Secretary General of NATO, an American lady, say, look, if the ceasefire comes in the way of peace, let's just move ahead. So what I would say there is the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And yes, Putin probably wants to get more territory, but also he doesn't want more sanctions. And the cost to human life in his country is very big as well. Now, these people, these soldiers don't come from St. Petersburg or Moscow. They come from the provinces. But at some stage, when you have the body bags coming back, that's not good for you either.
Yeah, no, that's certainly very true. And Dominic, Trump in some ways has himself seemed to move his position on Ukraine a bit in that one of the key sticking points for Ukraine is security guarantees, and the MAGA side of things is always very reluctant to talk about American power being used to support this what they sometimes see as a European problem. But Trump does seem to have softened his stance on that. They're talking about a coordinating role for the US, some sort of way of backing up Ukraine's security. Do you think that's significant?
I think it is. And Trump's position on this has been, if he was president, that this wouldn't have happened. Now, I'm not sure if that's actually right, but that's what he said over and over again, that this happened because Joe Biden was president and he was weak and Trump is strong. And if Trump was in office, this wouldn't have happened. That's very different than saying, that may or may not be true, but it's very different from saying that the United States has no interest here, has no role here. This is completely not a United States problem. And Trump doesn't want it to appear as though the United States is losing. Trump wants to be the winner. He wants to come out on top of every contest that he's ever a part of. And this was put on his plate from things that happened several years ago, and he doesn't want the U.S. to come out on the losing end, even if that's just the perception of it. And so I think that's one of the more underrated parts that's been under discussed in a lot of this. He doesn't have any kind of principled ideological objection to United States roles here. What he does have, though, is this belief that he wants the conflict to end, and if that involves something with the United States being involved, there's no principled reason that Donald Trump would oppose that. Whether that would be a good idea for the United States in the long run is a different question.
Yeah, Cornelia, I suppose this is all going to come down to, it seems at the moment, whether Trump can manage to get Putin and Zelensky in the same room and then something productive to come out of that conversation. That seems to be the current state of things. Do you think he's going to manage to pull that off?
I think he might just manage to pull that off. The question is, what will the security guarantees look like? I think for Europe, this was really important because let's look at it. Trump likes to deal with big nations. He likes to deal with entities that have clout. So he's happy to deal with an EU. He will maybe deal with Germany. He will deal with China. He will deal with India. It's clout matters. And for Europe, Europe was very scared that the US would sort of withdraw from Europe. And the US, ever since, by the way, Obama, the US has become more Asia Pacific oriented or globally oriented and less Atlantic focused. So for them, for the US to say, yes, maybe you Europeans have to pay for it, but in one way or the other, we are going to help you with security guarantees, was a big win for the European side.
Yeah, I think that will be an interesting thing to watch, won't it? It does seem like it's an important moment. With the question is, after this conflict presumably freezes in some sort of form, all the questions about where Russia might be eyeing up towards the Baltics or the Suwalki Gap or elsewhere. There's need some reassurance all round on that. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see whether this meeting between Putin and Zelensky is going to be arranged. It seems to be constantly in flux, even as we talk. But it's a fascinating time. We'll move on to our next topic, and drawing a comparison now between Britain and Argentina. Conservatives are searching for a way back to power, and some eyes are turning to Argentina, where President Javier Milei's bold free market reforms have confounded skeptics, pulling inflation down from 25% in December 2023 to just 1.5% in May 2025, while delivering a budget surplus without fresh borrowing and some very healthy growth figures. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has praised Milei's approach, hinting that radical fiscal prudence might help Britain's ruling party regain momentum. Could a promise to slim down the state and liberalise the economy be the Conservatives' answer to reform UK's insurgent appeal? Dominic, I mean, Trump and Milei actually get on very well, don't they? Milei came to Trump's inauguration, and I think he's once called him his favourite president. That's strange because they don't always seem to have particularly aligned ideological positions. Milei is much more free market than Trump often seems. But do you think that Milei has the potential to inform UK policy?
I think there's a lot we can learn from what's going on in Argentina around the world. I think one of the biggest things you can learn is that Margaret Thatcher was right when she said, socialism works until you run out of other people's money. And, in Argentina, they ran out of other people's money, and they elected Javier Milei because they wanted to change that. And he's kept that promise. He's been doing that in office, and it's been working. What's been going on in Argentina has been nothing short of remarkable. Argentina is going to have one of the fastest economic growth rates in the world, faster than more poorer countries that we would expect to have a faster rate. And he said earlier this year, people used to talk about the Chinese rate of growth, and now they're going to talk about the Argentinian rate of growth, and people sort of laughed at it. Well, it's true now. The IMF is projecting that Argentina is going to have a higher growth rate than China this year by about 2 percentage points. That's significant. And I think there's a lot we can learn in the U.S. as well. You're absolutely right, Mark, to point out these there's a lot of similarities drawn between Milei and Trump because they both have enormous personalities, are sort of quirky figures in a lot of ways, and are both on the right politically. But the similarities really end there, because if you look at Milei's background and career, he was an academically trained economist. He can hold hours-long discussions about economic theory in a way that Donald Trump never could. And he also has a very principled libertarian worldview that informs all of his policymaking decisions, whereas Donald Trump is much more based on instinct and his gut feeling in any given situation. And so they are very different in their governance style. Milei wants to get rid of import barriers. He wants to, significantly cut social spending. He wants to, deregulate on a massive scale in Argentina, in ways that Donald Trump really has never expressed interest in or done at all. And so, I do think there is plenty we can learn in the West from what's going on there, namely that there does come a point when government is so big and intrusive in the economy that people actually want it to shrink. And we just saw over the weekend the same thing happen in Bolivia. Bolivia, right north of Argentina, the two candidates that are advancing to the runoff election for president there are both against the socialist regime that has run the country for 20 years. And the voters there are fed up with high inflation, fuel shortages, and all those kind of things. And it's just proof again that socialism does not work. Markets do. And eventually, even if voters will vote for socialism for a while, they will come back around to what works eventually.
Cornelia, when Milei came in, there were a lot of prominent economists led by Thomas Piketty who lined up to say this is never going to work, this is very bad for Argentina, it's a dangerous route to go down, but they do seem to have been proved wrong by what's happened, certainly so far. Do you think it's sustainable, what he's achieved in Argentina?
Well, two things. First of all, allow me a little jibe. If I was Javier Milei and I had all that beef, I would obviously be against tariffs because I want to export my beef. But I couldn't help that. I couldn't help that little jibe here. But look, Milei has clearly been successful, but there has also been cost. I mean, there's been cost. There's more unemployed people. There's been cost to certain segments of society. So whilst I think in the UK we would do well to slim down our government or our bureaucracy a bit, our civil service a bit, we also need to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks, because I think if we did too much of that, we would have them on the streets. So we have to be careful. And to the, Argentina still lives on other people's money. They still have IMF facilities. Now the IMF is happy with what they've done, but they still have IMF facilities. But that's you and I, Mark, paying our taxes, which finance those facilities.
Sure. I suppose you're talking there about the costs that come with these policies, and in some ways that seems to be the difficulty that's really gummed up UK politics and left us in a sort of unsustainable position. At some point, someone is going to have to bear some costs for some very difficult decisions, whether that's around the triple lock on pensions or whether that's something we're going to talk about, property taxes in a moment. There is, in the end, someone is going to have to suffer, and our politics has been based on the idea that actually there's some sort of easy solution. Whether that's on the right or the left, often. Do you think that's a real problem, that until people are willing to face the fact that there will actually have to be some hard decisions taken and someone's going to lose out somewhere, we won't get things back on a sustainable footing?
No, absolutely. And I think that's where politicians need to message this. And the problem we have, especially with the Conservative Party, is you have Labour messaging one thing, and then you have the Reform Party telling them, we're the answer to all the problems, without really worked out policies. And people who are not economists might very well fall for that. So it's a hard message to give to an electorate that, yes, we need to do that. There is some bitter medicine to swallow, but we have to work ourselves through that. So nobody going into an election is very happily giving that. Look at what happened during the last election. Everybody promised sunshine and flowers forever.
Yeah.
And there's
Dominic,
a key difference, too.
Yeah.
I would say there's a key difference, too, between Argentina's government and the United States, which is that when Milei came into office, he could slash government employment. He could slash a lot of departments that didn't need to be there and do that kind of thing. Whereas in the United States, the real size of government problem is retirement programs. And that just swamps out everything else. Government employment in the United States as a percentage of the workforce is actually at one of its lower ebbs in many years. It's about 15%. It used to be closer to 20%, 50 years ago. So, cutting a bunch of government employment really wouldn't do very much. The main costs to the government and the main things driving the debt in the future are retirement programs, and that is politically much, much harder to do.
Milei, as you were saying, he has a unique combination in that he has a very strong background in economics. He has an understanding of the policy. And as Cornelia was saying, that's very important. But then he also has this flamboyant personality. He can really pull it off. He somehow has that combination. And I wonder, do you need both? And that's the problem in the UK, is we don't really have anyone who has both. You have maybe Nigel Farage, say, who is a little bit more flamboyant, can cut through with the voters, but it's not at all clear that the policies are in place. And then we have the Tories, who, some of them talk a good game, but we had one of the shadow ministers get out a chainsaw this week to make a little video, and it was a little embarrassing. It wasn't the same entertainment value as Milei with his chainsaw. Do you think that's the problem? Until we get the right politician who can do both of these things at once, we're really not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, it is difficult to imagine Kemi Badenoch as the lead singer in a rock band. But I think Milei has part of it is that Milei is very good at Argentinian politics, which is very very prone to theatrics in that way, and different countries have different political cultures with how they respond to things like that. And so I don't think it's exactly that you need to copy or have something like that. But charisma and personality are obviously helpful. I mean, most people, when they go to the polls, they are making decisions to vote based on who is a better speaker, who looks better on TV. That's the reality of what a lot of people are voting on. They're not necessarily voting on specific policy issues. And so that combination of personality and politics and policy is definitely part of what matters. And yeah, until somebody like that comes along, it's hard to say. I mean, we have the same thing in the United States where, from a more limited government conservative perspective that, I write for at National Review, we still look back on Ronald Reagan because Ronald Reagan had this incredible combination of charisma and policy that was able to be very, very effective. And, no Republican president since then has had that combination. Trump certainly has the personality, but doesn't necessarily have the policy. And then the other Republicans since then really, in many respects, didn't have either. And so Trump, Reagan is still sort of Reagan sort of came out of nowhere. He was an actor. He was governor of California before he was president, but his background professionally was in acting, not in politics. And I think sometimes these things happen, and that's just how history plays out.
Yeah, I guess that's why Margaret Thatcher is still so fondly remembered here on the right in the UK. We shall wait
to
and
say
see.
that
Yes.
my favorite man in a president is still Bush 1. Because he was not charismatic, but he was kind, and boy, did he have the background.
Well, we'll hope to see if we can get someone like that in the UK, and we'll wait and see if Kemi Badenoch can perhaps evolve into a leader more in that vein. Let's move on to our final topic today, which is the UK's Treasury is considering a shake-up of Britain's property levies, with homes valued above £500,000 potentially subject to a fresh charge. The proposal would replace stamp duty on owner-occupied homes with a national property tax, later complemented by a local version in place of council tax. Reforming council tax has long been seen as politically untouchable, but consensus is growing that the system no longer works. For Rachel Reeves, the plan could offer useful cover, raising revenue without breaching Labour's pledge not to increase taxes on working people. Might this finally mark the beginning of long overdue fiscal reform? Well, it's very unclear exactly what Labour have in mind. They're trying out some ideas, kite-flying some ideas in the national media to see what can happen. But there's something that most people can agree on in the UK, which is that the stamp duty tax that we currently have on houses is incredibly destructive. It gums up the system. It's taxed on money that's already been taxed. Cornelia, do you think this is a sign that even Labour are willing to acknowledge that there's at least one tax that they think is bad and they should get rid of, the stamp duty? Do you think we're going to finally see some sort of end or improvement of the stamp duty system?
I think not. I think what they need to find a way to raise taxes without telling people they're raising taxes. So I think this is the stealth way. And but it's a very difficult thing to do. I am old enough to remember the poll tax when Margaret Thatcher came in with the poll tax, and it was the end of Margaret Thatcher. So when you play with these things, it's quite difficult. And the thing is also, what are the thresholds? Are we going into a wealth duty of sorts? Because let's face it, most people's biggest asset is their house. So that's that. And when I look at what happened in the UK with getting rid of the non-dom status, which might have been the right choice to make, might not have been, but there was a major exodus. And when you look at what that did to property prices in London, in central London, oh my, that had an impact.
Yeah, Dominic, I think you do have annual property taxes in the US. Is that right? I mean, do you find that a better system?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as the stamp tax goes, Americans, we've been upset about British stamp taxes since the 1700s, but no, I think the property tax in the U.S. is it's not a national tax. So most property taxes in the U.S. are local. Some states have state level property tax as well. So that's how that usually goes here. I would just say overall, taxing your way out of a fiscal problem does not usually work. Usually what needs to happen, maybe there'll be modest tax increases as part of a broader reform package, but the thing that needs to happen in order for fiscal reforms to be credible is spending cuts. And there's a very simple mathematical reason for that, which is when you're looking at countries like the UK or the US that have, these rising retirement burdens in their budgets, which are based on demographic trends that aren't going to change. That means you have basically a cost that is projected to increase forever. And if you have a cost that's projected to increase forever, you cannot raise taxes forever to pay for it. It just can't happen. You need to find a way to bend that cost curve and to get it to either flatten or go down. That is the only way to be credible on this. And that's exactly the same problems that we have in the United States with Social Security and with Medicare. It's the same problem that you guys have in the UK. And so while a modest tax increase might be part of a package to solve that problem, ultimately what has to happen is spending cuts. And we've seen that from other countries as well. Countries that have successfully gotten out of fiscal crises have always done so by leading with spending cuts, because that's what reassures bondholders that they are going to get their money back, because they know just as well as anyone else does that you mathematically can't raise taxes to pay for a cost that's going to increase forever.
Cornelia, the bond market certainly aren't reassured in the UK at the moment. They're up at a level that hasn't been seen in a few decades. It's really quite high as they worry about the unsustainable nature of our debt. But Dominic there's talking about spending cuts. If there's one thing that Labour don't seem to be good at, it's enacting spending cuts. Do you think there's any hope that Rachel Reeves can find a way to get any through?
You see, I think they went for the wrong spending cuts. If you want to cut winter fuel allowance for pensioners, and you're a Labour government, so you say we're for the weak and the old and the widows and the orphans, and then you go after the widows and the orphans and the weak and the old, that doesn't work. So I think we have a really good point. We do need to make we need to make spending cuts, but it needs to be a really well thought through system. And that's where I would say, although I'm no fan of Javier Milei did a fine job. He had economists look at the whole budget over 10 years or so and really line by line go through it and see where he could cut out some fat. And I think that's something that needs to happen in the UK, maybe in a less drastic way, because again, if we are for a Labour government, it's difficult to go after people who are on benefits. But it's something that probably needs to happen. And I look at the deficit of a UK. I look at the deficits of a US, of a Japan, and I just shudder to think what that means 20 years down the road.
Yeah, it's a scary thought for sure, and maybe there's a lesson there for Kemi Badenoch if she wants to channel Javier Milei, that she needs to look at this sort of line by line spending cuts and prepare now for, well, there's quite an optimistic chance of her getting back into government at the next election, but you never know. Maybe if she really does that work and gets out a chainsaw, that could even happen. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you to Dominic Pino and Cornelia Meyer. Thank you both. Make sure you'll subscribe to our daily email briefings. Go to CapX.co. I'm Marc Sidwell. Goodbye.